Very happy that you've all sacrificed your weekend lunch hours to be with us today. And I'm even happier that there are very many young faces in the audience. Yeah, so we all at the gallery teach the minor in art history at NUS. So I would just say that we are holding the mantle of the permanent gallery exhibitions for the next generation. But without further ado, I want to kind of launch into the reflections of my most esteemed colleagues because they have the most experience with the inaugural DBS Singapore Gallery compared to me. And the first question that I posed to them was that I wanted each of them to think about what the highs and lows of the SG Gallery was for them. What they thought about the initial curatorial process to the final exhibition and the programs. And this, I think, also chimes in with the question that was sent in by the students who really wanted to find out more about the curatorial considerations from, your object selections, exhibition storyline, and audience engagement. Yeah. Who wants to take the first stab? I think, Ziri.
Question is...
the highs and the lows.
I think for me personally, the highs of putting together the Singapore Gallery must have been was the unprecedented nature of what we were doing. And I can think of a few aspects in which it was unprecedented. So firstly, we knew that it was going to be a long-term display. And in the Singapore art scene, although we have had a few different art museums in Singapore, starting with National Museum Art Gallery in the 70s, and then with the Singapore Art Museum in the 1990s, but in both of these museums, there was never a permanent display or long-term exhibition. All the exhibitions were short-term in nature. So the inaugural team, of which I was one member, we all felt that there was a need for there to be a much longer term display that would show the public the span of Singapore's art history. So I think the duration of the exhibition was definitely high for me. Secondly, I would say it's the breadth of what we were trying to do. We knew that people were familiar with certain aspects of our art history, like Nanyang art, or maybe the start of abstraction in Singapore. But we took the opportunity to rethink about how art history could be presented in Singapore, and we then took the step of extending the time span of the exhibition storyline. So you will see in the gallery, we actually started in the 19th century, which was not an uncontroversial decision, and then we pushed it all right to the year 2000. So in terms of the breadth of the exhibition, I think it was also fairly unprecedented. Thirdly, the depth in which we could approach the exhibition. We knew that there was a lot of research that had already been done in this area, but there was no way all of it could be presented in the exhibition proper. So for the exhibition, we then took the decision to publish a catalogue which would contain very in-depth essays by all the curators, as well as images of all the works that would appear in the exhibition. So I think this is, again, the first time that there has been such a publication dealing with Singapore's art history in such a fairly comprehensive manner. And I think the fourth aspect that struck me was we wanted for there to be some kind of comparability. By comparability, I mean that we knew that in addition to the Singapore Gallery, we were also going to establish the Southeast Asia Gallery, which is another permanent exhibition. And we wanted to use this opportunity for the public, when they visit us, to be able to visit both galleries at the same time, and then to see for themselves what the similarities and differences were between Singapore's art history and the Southeast Asian art history. So I think on those few aspects, those were the highs for me.
And I think people are very much interested in hearing also about the lows, or Well, challenges.
I think when we started on the process, a few limitations quickly came up to the curator. So definitely when we wanted to aim for breadth of the storytelling, meaning from all the way from 19th century to the late 20th century, we knew that there was a limit to how much we could do on this front because the size of the galleries are limited, so we estimated that we could only put about 300 works in the Singapore Gallery. So trying to fit like 200 years of art history into 300 artworks, you can imagine what the limitations might be. And one limitation came up very quickly, which was that we would almost inevitably have to sacrifice depth for breadth. So meaning that we couldn't have 10 works by each artist. Because if you have 10 works by each artist, you will only be showing 30 artists in the whole of the Singapore Gallery. So then we decided that no, we needed to show the breadth of the time span, as well as the breadth of the number of artists, the range of artists that we had. So in the end, you would see when you walk through the Singapore Gallery that for certain artists, they're only represented by one work, right, or two works. And that, of course, meant that you wouldn't be able to really have a very good understanding of that artist's practice, assuming the artist had many long years of practice. So I think that was, unfortunately, one of the things that we had to sacrifice when we presented the Singapore Gallery.
Maybe it's a good time for me to bring in Heng because there is a specific arc, you know, a medium-centric arc with the ink corridors. And when you guys were planning for the inclusion of ink, what did you guys face? What were some of the considerations for having, I think, for the very first time, you know, talking about Singapore ink traditions and even down to contemporary ink practices? And how did you see that medium centricity fit into the larger narrative, you know, lines of the Singapore Gallery?
So I was doing the curatorial plan for the second gallery, which is modern period. So the periodization basically is post-Second World War till like early 1990s. We stretched to that period. So at that time, we are not considered like to have an ink corridor. We actually plan to have an ink gallery at level 4. But later on, this concept is dropped. And we are thinking about how to locate the ink art into the permanent gallery. And so later on, the narrative is more argued as like ink art, not as like ethnic art form. I mean, it starts as like an immigrant artists bring their own culture or artistic form into Singapore. But how this form give a very good example to transform, to create a modern transformation. And many artists achieve very good results through this practice. So that become the argument. So when we do the indoor, we didn't make very closed space. We actually put as part of the modern art in Singapore, a very important component in that. So people can see the intention between the different medias, and many artists actually practice in both ink and oil, like not only the first generation, even the second generation leading artists like Ho Ying, Tan Sui Hian, Tan Ting Ki, they all practice in multiple media, and they never, drop the ink. So of course, at that time, there are some external scholar researchers, and during our workshop internally, they asking why we're putting up the ink, give such emphasis. But we are more considered about the productivity, and the good quality works actually appeared a lot in the ink practice. Our early artists, Wen Shi, Su Bing, even Liu Kang, also practiced ink. So we didn't want to, overlook this part, and we doesn't want to argue that it's ethnic form. We actually want to argue that it's a non-Western media, but how the artists use this non-Western media engage into the international and modernist dialogue. So that's the argument at that time. Yeah.
Did you have any particular regrets with how it eventually ended up? Were there things that you thought could have been done a lot better in terms of the curation?
Honestly, I feel I made a mistake. Actually, at the time when we put up the in corridor, I mean the spacing is fine. We make a lot of entry points. People can transfer freely from the in corridor to the other modern session, so they can immediately see the intention. The mistake is like we choose the jade green. We thought that would be very nice to highlight the ink painting. But at the end, it looks a bit dim because the lighting requirement for the paperwork is very dim. So that made the corridor, a little bit, not bright enough, not highlighted enough. So that's a mistake. Probably we should use just brighter background. Yeah.
And I want to bring Gertrude into the conversation because she's been guiding for many years at the gallery. So when this new Singapore gallery was brought forth, what were your feelings at the time? And how did you go about preparing to guide our public through the exhibition?
It was very, very exciting. It was like we started, our training, and you were part of it. You trained us like 2014. I think there were like 200 over of us, and some of the curators like Sujian here, was also involved in the training. But the challenge, was that the gallery was not up and running. So we didn't have that opportunity to see the real artwork. So we only see them, either in your PowerPoint or, in PDF. So we have no idea how big or how small is that work, all right? So I still remember the first round, when the gallery was open to the public, it was a naked museum. So it was a naked museum, meaning that we just come in and appreciate the architectural aesthetic without any artwork. And then when the artwork was finally, put up, we were totally amazed and really, really excited. So as a docent, the high is actually see a naked museum and now transforming to a real, actual museum. And what will be the lows? As a docent, we never go through that low because, that, as what Zoe had said, the breadth, so the challenge would be, oh my God, how are we going to, within that 1 hour, 60 minutes tour, bring across the breadth, the depth of Singapore art? I think that is also a real challenge for us. And this is a joke now, and it's a real joke. And when Chai Heng was training us for the ink corridor, not all of us, are at the same, I would say, a knowledge level. And the challenge for us is to also understand the, those, not only the curatorial language and the kind of academic language that you use to so used to it. Like, for example, when she was lecturing, she would say, oh, can you see this four gentlemen? So in Chinese painting, we all know four gentlemen refer to Mei Lan Zu Ji. Then one of our docents in our group, we are grouped together, and she turned around and said, Gertrude, where's the four gentlemen? I only see chrysanthemum. So I really, really appreciate those, opportunity coming together, for all that docent training in 2014, 2015. So as the inaugural batch, we are really very grateful.
Although I have to say, although the docents do receive training, they have also autonomy to extemporize. They do their own research, they run their own tours, and they respond to every specific group that they guide in very distinct ways. And I also wonder if you also receive feedback on your tours when you were giving them, in the early years, and what did they say to you?
In the early years, we didn't get a lot of feedback because it's like everybody is so excited, everything is so wonderful, And as the audience grew to be more mature, I would say, then you will get feedback. It's like, oh, why is gallery smaller than gallery 1 and 2, Yes. And so they will start asking more questions. So the initial opening, because everybody is in a high, so there aren't many questions.
So do you receive now more probing questions when you guide?
Definitely. So I'm very grateful that I can also see that our audience in the last 10 years have matured, and National Gallery has done a good job in terms of educating the public.
I'm kind of curious now. So what are some of the more challenging questions that you've received from our audiences?
Okay.
Don't shy.
Some of the artwork, they describe it as gross. Gross. It's like, oh, this work is so gross, you know? So how do you, as a docent, we are the bridge, right? So how are you going to bridge that to say that this is not gross, and what is that, thinking or that aesthetic meaning behind it? And of course, some specific work will be a little bit more sexual. So you have to sort of size up your audience. Are they more conservative, or are they more open to engage in this sort of conversation?
Heng, Ziwi, do you want to have anything to share about this?
I guess we know that there would be artworks that are going to be challenging, right? Whether they show images of violence, sexuality, or delve into kind of controversial issues. So I think one of the approaches that as curators we take would be, as far as we can, to let the artworks speak for themselves, right? Because the best artworks are usually the ones that can offer multiple entry points or multiple perspectives on a very complex issue. And the job of a curator, and by extension the docent, would be to offer more open-ended interpretations of the artwork, and not try to provide a piece of text that is very one-dimensional, and then you kind of direct the visitor to think along a particular path, because there could be many different ways that you could interpret that particular artwork. So I think that has been the approach that we would take whenever we are interested to put up a work that could be potentially objectionable, or some people might find it offensive. And of course, as with most museums, we do kind of take note of what the potential problems might be and kind of preempt them. So one way to preempting them would be, of course, to put up advisories before parents with young children encounter the artwork. So in case the parents have concerns, then they are pre-warned before they enter into a particular space where there could be images that they find disturbing. Yeah.
On that note, I mean, say for Heng's section with the ink corridor, it's not likely that you will receive feedback there was anything gross or obscene. But similarly, we are talking about taste. So we're arbitrating taste here in the museum. So with regards to, say, ink selections, I often overhear people talking about, whether this painting is better than the other. Some artist has painted this better than the other artist. So how would your, team kind of go about, explaining what actually makes a better ink work than the other one?
About the Singapore Gallery is about how to look at the ink painting. Basically, if for example, Fan Changqian, we have over 300 works in our collection, right? All is about four gentlemen. So, yeah, 梅兰竹菊, basically, right? So that's easy for training. You how to pick up the words, use the same technique, like 写意 style, brushwork.
So maybe you want to explain what that four gentlemen actually means to the audience for the uninitiated?
It's like the traditional scholar favorite subject matter, bamboo, chrysanthemum, plum blossom, what? 梅兰, orchid, yeah. That's the four, because the meaning of the flowers in Chinese traditional culture. Yeah, I'm not go further elaborate that. So for example, if the artist like Pan Shou, like calligrapher, or Fan Changqian in traditional Shanghai style, 写意 style, over 300 words, then you just need to to have a training in certain understanding about brushwork, calligraphy, then you can pick up. So that is a quite guided kind of understanding. But the problem is once the ink transformed to like modern practice, for example, like Su Bing, he didn't have very solid training in brushwork. But how do we value the work as compared to those artists like Fan Changjian and Wen Xi? That probably is the question. Like they have more solid training. Like Chen Zhongrui also have solid training. But Su Bing is so well known, so well respected as a modernist master in Singapore and Southeast Asia. So how we balance the selection, the criteria. So that will be more challenging for us. You look at the creative input, the creative imagination, the use of the non-ink references, or you very stick to, oh, this work, brushwork is not good, that one brushwork is not good. So that criteria probably is not so, relevant when we look at like modern ink, when they going towards transformation. The same situation as we look at the artists like Wu Guanzhong, all those. But there are also some artists, they're very good at both. For example, Wen Xi, he's a very, very overlooked artist, very solid training, very good in traditional practice, but also very practical, very versatile in different media, and very creative as well. So I remember we put the large piece of the herons, right? One part is very cubist abstract, but he leave one corner like seal carving, still using the xie yi star to painting the swimming fish. It's a very interesting piece as a centerpiece when we enter into the gallery too. Yeah.
I also wonder, because for, say, ink painting, there's a huge, I guess, conventional training and symbolism, whether the artists also try to use these conventions to also smuggle in or traffic more challenging or salacious ideas, So not only SG3 would contain all the controversial elements. So I'm just kind of curious to find out whether, our modern ink artists also use their medium to perhaps pose some transgressive or, provocative questions or symbols. Yeah.
The situation in Singapore is quite different. I mean, depends on the background. Ziwi, you may also like to share. Like the situation of the EK, he's a very struggling figure. He has to show he has traditional practice, solid background, because he is under the genealogy from the Fan Changqian, and he's like 师兄师弟, right? Under the same Fan school, right? They
kind of
will,
apprentice disciple lineage.
They will criticize like why he goes so further. But at the same time, he understands he in this kind of multicultural situation, professionally, economically, he have to have certain breakthrough, not stick to the traditional practice. So he tried to balance, and he had to deal with all the struggles and restrictions to work out his own way. That's his whole life struggle. So, but some artists don't have this kind of burdens. Like Dawu also used ink. He never have to worry about whether people can see he has training or not. He has some calligraphy training foundation, but that is not his burden. It really depends on the individual artist's background and experiences. Ziwi, you want to elaborate about a bit more? Because in the inaugural, we also put up an EK exhibition now. Ziwi is a curator for the show.
So I guess that's another aspect that we knew we had to grapple with when we put up the permanent exhibition, right? Because as I said at the beginning, we sacrifice depth for breadth in the permanent display. So we knew that we will always have to go and tell the public or our visitors that we have not overlooked depth. The depth will appear in our calendar of special exhibitions, our temporary exhibitions. And I guess one very good illustration of that was the Try K show, which was held in 2016. In the Singapore Gallery, I recall we only hung one work by 8K in the ink corridor. And that, I have to say, really didn't do him justice because he was really a very well-rounded ink artist, ventured into many different directions, but we only focused on one painting office in the Singapore Gallery. So when we had the chance to present a special exhibition on him, a retrospective, that was the opportunity that we could share with the public the true depth and breadth of his own individual practice as an artist. So I think that has been the compromise that we tried to strike between the display in the Singapore, in the permanent exhibition, and our roster of temporary exhibitions. And actually, when Cai Heng was talking about the dilemmas of putting up the ink corridor, I just wanted to say something in defense of the ink curators, because they really have a very difficult job to do, primarily because of the fragility of the ink paintings. These are all ink and color done on paper. So according to our own museum's conservation guidelines, they can really only be displayed for 1 whole year, and then they have to be rested for another 4 years before they can be taken out again. So you can imagine, for our opening, definitely we chose the best possible Fang Changtian. We chose the best possible pan show to put up for our first show in 2015. But 1 year later, due to our conservation guidelines, we had to take these excellent works down and we have to replace them, right? So you can imagine, it's not easy trying to maintain a consistent level of quality, if you want to term it as such, within a permanent display. So I think that is one of the real practical limitations when we put together a permanent exhibition.
Thanks, guys. I just want to now turn our attention away from the artists to the audience or our visitors. So how did the team at the time judge how much to simplify or explain in terms of content and specialized vocabulary? Because we have received feedback that's varying. Some felt it was too simplified, but at the same time, also not enough, right? So, and then what does this demand of accessibility mean to you, in the context of Singapore? And when we also translate, we also lose some flavor and color, right? Particularly when we translate from our ethnic languages to English. How did you guys, in your specific areas of work, deal with these questions? Gertrude, do you want to go first? Because you have to kind of speak to the public.
Okay, as a bridge, we are the docents, and we will not dumb down all that information because we only have 60 minutes. Because at the end of the day, you want them to bring, an engaging experience, a wonderful experience, so that they will return. So we are very privileged to understand all the challenges from the curators. Then we have our own set of challenges too, okay? As what Zui said, they have to rotate the work. And we always have our favorite, and we know that, the favorite will able to bring that tour to come alive. Like for instance, okay, we talk about Chen Wen-si. So our favorite was that $50 note painting, all right, that Gibbons painting. So if you have $50 notes, you might want to take it out right now and then turn to the back, and that was one of Chen Wen-si's work. So everybody get very excited because it's very relatable. Then the next thing is, oops, it's being rotated out. So what is my next story? So the challenge for us, how to make it accessible. We need to find the heart of the artwork that is not just intellectual, but emotionally they can connect with that artwork. So that is about the accessibility. So is Chong Su Ping's work. Just right behind me used to be like drying salted fish, and then again very accessible, then being rotated out. So accessibility is not just how you display, but can the public look at the artwork and say, yes, I feel so connected, I feel so proud, and I see myself in that artwork and I can feel that artwork. So I think it's quite challenging, definitely.
Zui, Cai Heng, because you guys have to write the labels and wall text.
So I guess in terms of providing information to the public, we recognize from the onset that the exhibition itself really had to cater to the layperson, someone who would not necessarily be familiar at all with any of the artists or art concepts or art ideas that we were going to talk about. So from that perspective, we deliberately took a much more accessible way of writing the exhibition labels and the exhibition wall text. You would find that for the permanent exhibition, the section text on the walls usually begins with a quote from an artist or an art society. And I think we took that decision because we wanted to give the voice of the artist back into the exhibition and have the artist speak directly to the visitor. And we felt that that was a strategy that could create that emotional connection that Gertrude was talking about. So rather than the first sentence being something that the curator has written, we wanted to deliberately choose direct quotes from artists or art societies or artist manifestos that would give the visitor a flavor of what artists or art societies were thinking about at that period of time. And for the more informed audience, then we were able to provide more in-depth content, either through more information on our website, or as I said, the exhibition was accompanied by a fairly sizable publication with a lot more information and in-depth essays contained within. So that was the compromise that we took. Otherwise, the entire exhibition would be full of text, because if you had to provide information for both the lay person as well as the specialist, there will be no end of information to be offered. Yeah. And I guess in terms of language, I could address. I think it's inevitable. Here in Singapore, we have adopted English as our kind of official language. So all the ethnic terms would have to be translated to English to make it accessible. Having said that, we do provide translations in our 3 other mother tongue languages that's available, either on the app or in the form of room sheets. But where possible, I think the curators have tried as far as possible to selectively use the ethnic terms. So I think the best example would be, of course, the title of the Singapore Gallery exhibition. We called it Siapa Nama Kamu, which in Malay means, what is your name? We could have just translated it into English and called this exhibition, What is Your Name? But we knew that maybe not many people, or not many Singaporeans might actually know what Siapa Nama Kamu means. So we took some effort to explain it within the exhibition text. But we wanted to use that because it was a question which appears in a work by Tramiati known as National Language Class. So it was something written or produced by an artist, and we thought it was a very meaningful way to provoke our visitors to think further about issues of identity and belonging when they enter the Singapore Gallery. Hence, we decided that we will keep the Malay question as the title rather than translating it. Yeah.
Okay, perhaps to push that a little bit further and maybe address that other elephant in the room, because we have received feedback that our galleries are perhaps not even inclusive enough, actually, even though we have a Malay exhibition title, that we haven't really fully embraced the diversity that is within Singapore, and that some of our visitors, some communities don't even see themselves in the works that we show, in the narratives that we put out. So in terms of the curation at the time, how did you all deal with these questions? Yeah.
They definitely have the internal discussion about the percentage of Malay artists and Indian artists. And I think we also very careful and mindful about the selection, but some is really like don't have enough materials or relevance of the works. For the female artists, I think that's why we try our best to secure a few keywords from the Singapore airline for the Lifome part. So we think we should more emphasize on the second generation, not only like people know Georgette, all those, right? And for the ink part, it's quite a pity at the time. We didn't have many good female artists. Yeah, we we value the artistic standard a lot, and we don't have very good work found yet. So now we actually pick up. So hopefully we can support the future Singapore exhibition, permanent or temporary. Yeah, so that is the gaps we are looking now. Yeah.
I think as the curatorial team worked towards the opening of the Singapore Gallery, it slowly became apparent to the team that there were going to be gaps within the storyline that we wanted to convey. Some of the gaps, as Tai Heng mentioned, would be there would not be enough or sufficient representation of Malay artists, Indian artists, women artists, sculptors, as well as artists who worked in the photographic medium. How did these gaps appear? Well, various factors. Some of it could be that there hasn't really been much research in the past years in these areas, and there might not also have been sufficient acquisitions to bring these works into the national collection. So it's quite a complex problem, but it was a problem that we had recognized quite early on, even before the Singapore Gallery opened. So after we opened, when the curators had some time to breathe, we then embarked on a much more concerted effort to undertake greater research and acquisitions in some of these gaps. Yeah. So I hope some of these gaps would eventually be addressed in the revamped version of the Singapore Gallery.
Gertrude?
Well, I guess I have a easier role because I can choose what I like to include in that 60 minutes. And usually public who join our tour are not art critic who is so fierce. Why didn't you include more women? Why do you have so few Malay artists? So I'm luckier. So in that sense, when I walk them through, I think more not so much of this sort of issue, but picking artwork that will reflect the breadth as well as a variety of medium. Because if you just see canvases on the wall, it is less exciting. So you have to be also mindful in picking sculpture, even video works, because video is something is like, oh, okay, you just watch and then you walk away. Photography, okay, photographs. So we are a little bit luckier because the public will not, turn around and say, oh, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? I can always say, oh, it's a curatorial decision, Yes.
Well, actually, hold that thought. I want to push that a little bit further to ask if you might be able to also speak on behalf of your docent colleagues, whether you all made a conscious effort to always include not just only Chinese artists in your selections for the tour.
Okay. I can't speak for everyone, but at least I speak for myself. Okay, first, we have to read a lot. As what Zoe said, they wanted to present the breadth, and some of the works we might find easier for us to, talk about and discuss, but some works may be too tough. Because you may want to pick a certain artwork, but then on that very day, and you look at your audience, they may not be able to engage with the work. So before I start any tour, usually I will size up my audience. Do you have more auntie uncles? Do you have more grandmas? Or do you have a more sophisticated, informed group of audience who really know their art? So it's a very tough question. It's not like I'm trying to avoid, let's say if I sense that this whole group of people are a lot of female, okay, I share with one recent, it's not about this exhibition though, it's a recent experience. It's like whole group of them are all women. So I can bring in more feminist, perspective to share with them. And then I don't seem like, I'm some aggressive feminist trying to push some agenda and issue.
But men can be feminists too, right? Zoom?
It depends how open they are. Yeah, it depends. So I'm not trying to avoid answering your question, but this is the situation. Always I have to always look at my audience, so that they will not write a complaint to say that, oh, this tour either is too boring or too controversial. So we are public facing, so we have to be also very mindful. Very mindful.
But I have to say maybe a word of defense for my colleagues. We have put in quite a bit of effort to address these aspects over the years. I mean, we're going to be 10, like a preteen, so it's given a bit of time for us to do the research, buy the works, engage with the different communities. But I would say be patient, because everything takes time, right? And you don't want a tokenistic job of addressing these, different constituents, right? Yeah, but I also want to come back again also to the audience, because we also regularly receive a lot of feedback from people who come. And then someone asked for more ancient or more contemporary artworks because they felt modern paintings were not unique, in quotes, right? Which I understand to mean bland or boring if they were not unique. So I just wanted to ask your thoughts on how we can sell the modern, because this is pretty much our bread and butter, right, to our contemporary public in Singapore. Who wants to go first?
I guess the great difficulty really for us is that we are still living in the modern era. So the modern is very familiar to all of us and to our public. So hence, I'm not surprised by that reaction when they come into Singapore Gallery and they find works like these and they don't think it's particularly interesting or groundbreaking. So I think the challenge has always been for us to show, actually, the modern was extremely groundbreaking when it first emerged in Southeast Asia in the 19th century, right? When the Europeans, whether through trade, conquest, religion, came to this part of the world, they brought with them very new ideas, very new concepts, and it inevitably had a tremendous effect on this part of the world in terms of how they organize societies, new systems of knowledge, new ways of thinking about the world, and that inevitably also affected artists in the region, new ways of making art. So I think as the people in the region at the time, they were so taken, I suppose, or they must have been very excited by some of these new ideas and new concepts, and artists too. So if you think about it, it's quite commonplace to see oil paintings being produced by Singapore and Southeast Asian artists, but painting with oils on canvas is in fact something foreign to this part of the world. But it was encountered by our local artists, and they took on this foreign medium, adapted it, changed it, reinterpreted it. So I think the challenge for us would be how we can convey that sense of wonder and excitement which the artists themselves must have felt when they produced their work. So I think, it's something that we still need to work harder on. Yeah.
Do you think that digital technology can also help us in a lot of ways? I'm kind of just thinking about, say, you guys might be familiar with Refik Anadol, right? With these very spectacular, abstract vistas, on giant screens. Yeah. What is your own feeling about, technology assisting us in terms of appreciating the modern?
For me, I feel technology definitely can help because if it aids in our understanding of the artwork, I mean, I would welcome it. I mean, things like having QR codes so that people can get additional information, or providing documentation, video documentation of past performances. I think all that aids in the better understanding and appreciation of the artwork. But I think for us as curators and as an art museum, the artwork still has to be the primary form of engagement rather than the technology.
May I add on to what Zui said? I totally agree with him. Why do I come into a museum if everything is digital? I want to see the artwork. I want to feel the artwork. So digital is digital work or digital aid, they are enabler, but it cannot replace the entire experience unless you don't have the artwork anymore and you want to recreate that experience. Yes, so digital will come in very handy. And then, as you said, how do I get people to appreciate the modern and all that? I think stories about the artist really, really help. Rather than just look at the artwork, it's okay, it's an inanimate object, right? But if you bring in the perspective of the artist, and the stories of their struggle, and their journey as being an artist and how they get to produce this work, I think it really works because you make this inanimate object come alive, that it is not just produced by any artist, but as the Chinese say, this artist 有血有肉, meaning it's made of flesh and blood, So for docents, our strategy always knowing the artist is very important, and the advantage of guiding some of this work, the modern works, that some of these artists are still alive, very much alive. And the excitement is when you get to see the artist, meet the artist. To us, these artists are rock star, Yeah, it's like, wow, I really get to see this artist. Personally, I get really excited. So when I talk about that work, it is very transformative. It's no longer, 看什么哈, 看什么哈, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? A patch of color, only patch of color, But then when you show them the photographs, the story of the artist, their high point, their low point, it makes a lot of difference.
Well, I don't know. There are many young faces here. We will leave it to the Q&A later to discuss whether it's actually even convincing for them. Yeah, because the expectation to have technology infiltrating our exhibitions as experiences is imminent. Yeah, so we can't skirt that. Okay, we are fast approaching 3 p.m., but I want to kind of round up the discussion with, something a bit larger, and which also chimes in with a question that we received from our students. So I really wanted us to discuss what is the value of a Singapore gallery to the world, or for the world, right? Who do you think our Singapore gallery should speak to? And this is particularly relevant because we received a question from the class who wanted to know whether, these themes of nationalism and nation building are relevant at a time where art history wishes to be deterritorialized. So we have a more globally connected approach to thinking about art history. Yeah. So what is our place in the world now, with this exhibition? It's a big one, so...
I guess for me, how do we really get to know a place like Singapore? You can read about statistics, the GDP, number of people in Singapore, its economic, financial, technical achievements. But I think if we really want to know the heartbeat of a society, of a nation, then it's really through works of art. I'm not just talking about paintings, but it could be novels, films, music. These are, creations by the people here, and they express their thoughts, their worries, their anxieties, their aspirations for this place that we call Singapore. So in that respect, I think that's where an art museum like the National Gallery plays an important role. I mean, our focus is on one particular aspect of art, which is the visual arts. So we hope that through the stories that we tell in our exhibitions, we hope that you can gain some insight into what artists feel and think, and then reflect those thoughts back onto yourself. And I think that should really start a conversation, and that would hopefully start a conversation about what it means to be a Singaporean, and issues about identity and belonging.
Anyone wants to reflect our relationship to the world?
Once we left the gallery, the permanent display, we are looking more clear. I think last time we used more framework about alternative modernity. We talk a lot about alternative modernity. And recently I read a review, scholar review by Taipei Art Museum Journal. They actually look at our inaugural show as a good example of talking about global art history, the method. Because the sites itself, provide a lot of complexity and layers, like ethnic, cultural forms, and post-war situation, independence. And also this site, because it's always be the global transportation, very important port, right? So many artists come down as immigrants, as refugees from the wars, like those artists Heng, even some artists from Russia. So this is really a place we're looking at the global history and can use very effectively and strategically to do some very in-depth survey and case studies of some artists' condition in the 20th century, such as Gertrude, it's a case. And also Heng traveled down for many years, and also some Australian artists, UK artists. And eventually, in the post-war period, also have some artists come down, travel, and living, So I think that is actually give us a lot of the primary resources, and can use a new approach to rewrite the history of this region, this island, connecting to the war, and very connecting to that situation.
And Gertrude, when you guide foreigners, do you feel like they can connect quite easily to our histories?
Definitely they can connect. I mean, a lot of our artists, they also went overseas to study. And they receive foreign education, be it, some of them also from China, some of them went to UK, US, and whatever they produce definitely have the international and global influences. So it's not like, we are just an island and being isolated and we do not know what is going on. So through their work, they can engage. They say, yes, I can relate that back to, let's say, they're from France. They say, okay, I see this art movement, or they're from UK, Tate Modern and all that. Yes, they're able to, see those influences, and they're able to connect with those works. So if you ask, how do we connect internationally? I think those artwork represent that we are not just an isolated island. We are totally aware of all the art movement and trends that are influencing us, and at the same time, we produce artwork that is unique. We're not just copy, and then we have develop our own language, our own visual language, and it becomes more and more evident by the time you go to the last part of since we're talking about ink, the last part of the ink corridor, they no longer paint the four gentlemen. That was very obvious. And then gallery 3 is also very evident. So this is my sharing.
Okay, good timing. Because now we have really good, ample time to open this discussion up to the floor. Yeah, I think there is a roving microphone here on the left for any of you who want to pose questions to our panelists. Yeah. Or I think also for the people who are in Singapore, what are your own desires? What do you hope to see, when we have a revamped gallery? Yeah, I think it's a good time to share. Yeah. Don't be shy. Yeah.
Hello. So thank you to the panelists for their sharing, and I think it's really insightful, especially for the students that came down today. So maybe one question I had was that when planning for a permanent exhibition and knowing that it will be there for like almost a decade, are there worries about balancing a durable, timeless appeal and also a show that is perhaps more responsive and reflective of the current day? And maybe does the rotation of works and docent guided tours provide some flexibility to tweak the story as it unfolds? Okay, thank you.
Or maybe we start with the docent, since the last question was about docent.
Yes, we do take liberty in tweaking, but not too much, because we still have to observe the integrity of the curatorial approach and philosophy. Okay, so this is the short answer to it. And when I say tweaking, what do we tweak? We can pick some of the artworks in that 60 minutes. But let's say if the story is about identity, we cannot deviate from say, oh, this is talking about other things. So we work hand in glove with the curators. We are not like some independent cowboys, yes.
Thank you for your question. I think that the aspects that you pointed out are definitely the weaknesses of having a permanent display, right? Our Singapore Gallery, in terms of chronology, has a definite start date, early 19th century, and a very clear end date, which is the last work of Gallery 3, which is the most recent work, so maybe about the 2000s. So definitely we won't be able to accommodate more recent developments which took place in 2010, 2020s. So that's one definite drawback. And we, again, kind of share with the audience that some of these drawbacks we try to address in our temporary special exhibitions. So these are more thematic displays, and they can be a lot more current than the permanent exhibition. But we also want to spend some time to kind of educate our public to say, don't think that the permanent exhibition doesn't change. Actually, it changes every year. Because as I said, many of our works are done on paper. So photography works, watercolor paintings, ink paintings, calligraphy. So I would say maybe about 30% at least of our artworks are made of this medium. So, which means that each time you come, at least 30% of the works would have changed. So hopefully, with the change of artworks, you will see the gallery with new perspectives.
Well, if I may, I find your question or your choice of words, durability, quite interesting, and so-called timeless appeal, because this is also the pressure that we face as museum curators, that we have to ensure that our well-loved masterpieces are always on display in our exhibition galleries. Yeah, but I tend to not want to think that that is a given, You young people will have your own masterpieces in your own lifetimes. So for me, what is perhaps more interesting for me to introduce is flux into the space. I don't take anything for granted, right? That everything is already pre-established, predetermined. As more research gets introduced, we also want to reflect that in the space. And with regards to time and chronology, that also isn't always fixed, right? The arrow pointing forwards in the future is always moving, right? And so we can also go further back, which is also, I guess, the prompt from that audience feedback, shouldn't we have more ancient? I guess it's prompting to go and find out what's older than the 19th century. You know, what other stories of Singapore do we have on offer? And I would say that this is the most interesting aspect of our research, as it were. And if we can draw, you know, formal relationships or even, I guess, speculative, mytho-poetic ones, we do that as well. It may be not in an exhibition. It could also be in a program that we introduce in the space. Our curatorial programs colleagues are now doing a podcast using our collection works, you know, and looking at a kind of science fictive way to introduce these artworks. So yeah, we have multiple tools at our disposal, yeah, in this current, you know, era. Any other further questions from the floor? Yeah. Yes.
I think my question is one that is more related to like the actual like curatorial practice, because you mentioned at one part about accommodating for the diversity of works, that there are some works that because of like artistic standards that you can't like quite, you know, display like maybe those sides. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on what exactly those standards are.
That's why you take the RH3 minor, right? Yeah. And visit gallery more, so you will improve the eyes. Yeah.
It's a kind of an old question about aesthetic judgment, right? So I don't want to sound relativistic about things, but oftentimes taste is conjugated because, you know, there's a critical mass, you know, of opinions that persuades, you know, another mass of people that this is better than the other, right? In terms of, you know, either formal aspects or its intellectual rigor. You know, it is, I think, an evolution of critical opinion and also familiarity with, you know, the technique, you know, how well done something is versus some other piece. We're making judgments all the time, but as a viewer of art, you know, we can present our arguments, our ideas, our opinions to you, but you have the choice to make up your own minds about it and actually go back and ask yourselves whether you are persuaded by the arguments put in front of you in an exhibition. I'm frequently doing that in other people's exhibitions, whether they, you know, are compelling, whether they persuade me to what they were trying to achieve. And I think what I would love our visitors to do is to also have the similar attitude to this. But I also hope that it comes from a place of being curious and informed. Yeah, so you're not casting these aspersions onto something that, you know, you just kind of dismiss it out of hand without doing further research or asking other questions. Yeah. Anybody wants to add to that?
And I would also say that there are usually more than one criteria when it comes to selecting an artwork for the exhibition, right? I mean, if you could assess the work maybe purely along its for its compositional qualities or its use of colors, but that's just one particular aspect. Very often in selecting an artwork for an exhibition, you, as a curator, you're often thinking, does this artwork best convey the message or the intent of what this exhibition is trying to put across? So out of 10 artworks by one artist, possibly only one or two might best convey that message. And then after that, there are other more mundane considerations. Does the size of the work fit the scale of the room? Does the work that you choose, how does it have a dialogue with the work next to it, or opposite it, or across the room? So sometimes it's not just about assessing the formal qualities of the artwork before you select the artwork. There are some of these other, external considerations too.
Perhaps I share with you my personal journey. Before I started, researching, I went away for 1 year to study art history because I'm so passionate, and I said, okay, I'm going to take this a bit further. And, as a docent, we are very busy. You may not have that opportunity to read very, very deeply into all the academic journals. But that 1 year, I began to research on decolonization, the history, art history, and specifically on decolonization. And then I'm supposed to write an essay. And I thought about, why don't I pick that artwork that is right here, Siapa Nama Kamu, road work interrupted, with a tiger jumping out. And then before I did all that, I couldn't understand why the curators picked such a small artwork, really very small, at the entrance, And it's like, and then everybody has to gather there, and then it's like, the Hokkien say, 看什么, 看什么, what's there to see? You see, if you don't have that decolonization, theory or knowledge, so then that moment of aha came to me when I start reading all these works. And I said, I totally understand why that work has to be there to anchor, Siapa Nama Kamu. Why is it that work, is so important when we want to talk about Singapore, decolonization, and how we want to start this whole entire journey with Coleman, doing his road survey, and then with a tiger leaping out. So I totally get what Zoe was trying to say. Sometimes you might even choose a small one because of, the, how would I say, the idea or the curatorial message that you want to convey. I don't know how to put it across, but sometimes it gets lost in translation because we didn't make it very, I would say, explicit. I feel that we are still very, modest, very subtle in communicating certain ideas that we want to push. So let's say if we were to rewrite, now I'm really thinking to rewrite that, why we put that Coleman road work interrupted, back there again. Perhaps, we can explain in a more, I would say, explicit way, and how do we want to look at decolonization?
Point taken, that we will try to be much more direct in terms of our curatorial decisions. So we want to communicate this much more directly to the visitor. But I also want to not omit the point about also, we don't just make aesthetic decisions. Sometimes we make ethical ones. We also do decide on whether an artist should be represented in our galleries, right? So artworks are not just artworks, they're made by somebody, and that somebody has done something or, represented a certain form of position that the gallery does not agree with. And then we have to decide whether this person should be included within, the story. Yeah. So there are not just one, basket of things to think about. Yeah, every time we decide on what goes on into an exhibition. And what happens on a page is very different from what happens in a space. Yeah. Anyone else? No questions are. Okay, maybe then I will address a question that was addressed to me and my team about the revamp from the students. I think they were just curious about, what's coming up. And I guess I want to say first that even though it's a kind of an aspirational move to want to revamp the permanent gallery, my first instinct is actually not aspiration, but to aspirate, right? To give a new breath of air to the exhibition galleries. By that I mean to revivify, just by simply introducing more light, more color. And principally, that's also because I think I truly want the exhibition galleries to form a kind of emotional core through artworks and artists for our visitors, right? I think the first inaugural exhibition, we all have anxieties about not conveying the scholarship, the known timelines, artists, artworks, we scared you all don't know enough, so we have to put it out like a textbook. But I think as we get into our 10th year, I do want to have more emotional resonance, and then coming out of a post-Taylor Swift time, I also realized that Singapore is not emotionally comatose as we like ourselves to be known. And so I think that is quite key to how I, and my team would like to present our new narratives to the world. And also because the post-independence section, I think, deserves much more significance in our attention space. And our post-independence artists, a lot of them are abstract artists. And a lot of them would say and explain their paintings in terms of emotions, right? They're painting colors, but a lot of it is connected to their emotions. But those things are the hardest things to articulate, much more than, dry facts and figures, right? And historical moments. So those are the things that I think, want to kind of help carry the visitors through our spaces. And that no longer are the exhibitions to be just behind doors in, sections of exhibition galleries. This entire floor is the exhibition gallery, right? So out of doors, in the corridor spaces, this is a space of possibility to think about Singapore and our art and artists differently. Yeah. But I also have my colleagues here, and if you guys want to chime in, please do. Yeah. Anyone? But I think importantly, maybe I just want to have a sense whether you guys feel that this is a direction that you want and you desire to see. Yeah. Can't tell from your faces, Lei. Yeah. Show me the Taylor Swift emotion. Come on. Okay, but anyway, I won't put you on a spot. But maybe to turn it back to the panelists, and whether you feel like this is a good turn of a page for the DBS Singapore Gallery.
Definitely. I think 10 years is, sufficient time for us to be able to now take stock of what we have done and what the visitor response has been, and then to kind of use this opportunity to show the public the new research, the new acquisitions, and the new knowledge that we have gained in the past 10 years, and then to present a more compelling or more emotionally resonant story. I mean, I'm all for that.
No questions, really? Oh. Okay, I won't press further because we do have food and drink waiting for us, and then we can have a more casual catch-up and conversation on the side flank. So anyway, thank you all for your kind attention this afternoon, and please give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.